Behind the scenes, the legal pressure surrounding Sean Diddy Combs is reaching a boiling point. Sources say massive legal bills are piling up while multiple law firms remain on retainer. No one knows exactly how much money is still flowing in, but a lot of money is definitely going out every single month. Now, an unexpected courtroom strategy could drag Diddy into one of hip-hop's darkest mysteries. A legal move is unfolding that could potentially force the imprisoned mogul to testify in the upcoming Tupac Shakur homicide trial. If that happens, it could crack open decades of speculation surrounding the 1996 Las Vegas shooting that shook the entire music industry. For years, many believed Sean Combs had managed to distance himself from the lingering ghosts of that era. But that protective shield may now be breaking apart. At the center of the storm is Dwayne Keefe D. Davis, the man currently facing charges connected to Tupac Shakur's killing. Davis is confronting the possibility of spending the rest of his life behind bars. But instead of quietly fighting the case, his legal team is preparing a strategy that could pull one of hip-hop's biggest figures directly into the courtroom spotlight. Davis previously told investigators that a $1 million offer was made to eliminate Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight. According to statements attributed to him, he claimed the alleged offer came from the head of Bad Boy Records. That allegation has existed in interviews, documentaries, and police records for years. However, Davis's defense now argues that many of those statements were exaggerated or made during media appearances for attention. Still, the story remains central to the case. The strategy now unfolding in court is unusual and extremely risky. Davis's defense is essentially daring prosecutors to address the bigger accusation. If investigators truly believe Davis's story about the 1996 shooting, then the defense argues authorities should also examine the person Davis claimed financed the attack. But if prosecutors refuse to pursue that claim, the defense plans to use that gap as reasonable doubt. In other words, Davis's team is creating a legal trap. If the alleged financier isn't charged, the defense could argue the entire theory falls apart. Why would someone confess to involvement in such a serious crime unless the larger story behind it was true? The defense isn't trying to prove Davis's innocence outright. Instead, they are trying to convince a jury that the story surrounding the shooting is incomplete. That argument could introduce enormous uncertainty into the trial. Part of what makes the situation so explosive is the existence of recorded interviews Davis gave to investigators years ago. In those recordings, Davis described a meeting at a restaurant in Los Angeles where he claimed the $1 million offer was discussed. Those statements became a key reason he was eventually arrested in 2023.
I think that they don't want, if they was in any of those freak-off tapes, if they played a part in any of those Diddy sessions, they don't want it to get out to the general public to make up their...
Now his defense team is attempting to reshape how those statements are interpreted. They argue that while Davis admitted being present during the events surrounding the shooting, the claim about financial motivation remains unproven unless the person he named addresses it publicly. That's where the subpoena idea comes in. If a judge allowed it, Diddy could theoretically be called to testify about the allegation under oath. Legal analysts say that scenario would create enormous pressure for everyone involved. If he denied the accusation, the defense might claim it proves Davis's previous statements were unreliable. But if prosecutors pushed further, the trial could spiral into a much larger investigation. For now, authorities have made their position clear. Sean Combs has not been charged as a co-conspirator in the Tupac case, and police have stated publicly that he has never been considered a suspect. Still, the timing of this legal maneuver adds another layer of drama. Sean Combs is already facing a major fall from the business empire he once controlled. After a conviction in 2025 related to federal charges under the Mann Act, his financial and business situation reportedly changed dramatically. Industry estimates suggest his net worth has dropped significantly from earlier highs. Reports have also surfaced claiming legal expenses tied to numerous civil cases are putting heavy pressure on his finances. Whether those reports are accurate or not, one thing is clear. The once untouchable mogul is now dealing with serious legal battles on multiple fronts. That's why the possibility of being pulled into the Tupac trial carries such massive consequences. For decades, Sean Combs has consistently denied any involvement in the violence that defined the East Coast-West Coast rivalry of the 1990s. In interviews over the years, he has often described himself as someone who wanted to move the culture away from conflict and towards unity. But the allegations surrounding that era have never completely disappeared.
I realized Big was that type of rapper that he could get at somebody, and I think Puff was trying to tell him, don't go that route. You understand what I'm saying? But still putting out songs like Who Shot Ya in the intro, but telling Big not to go at nobody, which was crazy.
The defense team representing Dwayne Davis appears ready to bring those old accusations back into the spotlight. Not necessarily to prove them true, but to create doubt about the case against their client. And in a criminal trial, reasonable doubt can be powerful. Prosecutors now face a difficult balance. Calling new witnesses or expanding the scope of the trial could complicate the case. But ignoring the defense strategy might allow the narrative to shift in ways that confuse jurors. For now, the situation remains unresolved. What happens next could determine whether one of hip-hop's longest-running mysteries stays buried or explodes back into the public eye inside a courtroom. Right now, the legal situation surrounding the Tupac Shakur case has turned into a tense strategic standoff. Every possible move could expose someone, and the stakes could not be higher. Dwayne Keefe D. Davis is facing the possibility of spending the rest of his life in prison if convicted. Legal experts say the charges tied to the 1996 Las Vegas shooting carry extremely serious penalties, meaning Davis could remain incarcerated well into old age if the court rules against him. That's why his defense strategy is drawing so much attention. The defense argues that many of Davis's earlier statements about the case were exaggerated or made for publicity. They point to his memoir, Compton Street Legend, and claim that some of the dramatic stories connected to the shooting were told to build his reputation and sell books. But the situation becomes complicated when looking at the timeline of those statements. Some of Davis's most detailed allegations weren't made in public interviews or media appearances. They were made during private conversations with investigators, statements that were recorded long before the current trial began. Those recordings raise a difficult question. If someone invents a story purely for attention, why would they share the most damaging version of it during confidential police interviews? Normally, people involved in criminal activity try to distance themselves from powerful figures, not implicate them. Naming a famous industry leader in a violent conspiracy would usually make someone a target rather than a hero. Yet Davis did exactly that. Now his legal team is attempting to flip the narrative entirely. Instead of standing by those past claims, the defense may argue that Davis exaggerated or fabricated parts of the story, and that prosecutors built their case around unreliable statements. That creates a complicated situation for jurors. If Davis once confessed and now claims the confession wasn't accurate, the jury must decide which version, if either, reflects reality. And if both versions raise doubts, that uncertainty could weaken the prosecution's case. But the shadows surrounding this trial stretch back years before the Las Vegas shooting. Long before Tupac Shakur was killed in 1996, there was another violent event that changed the direction of hip-hop history. In 1994, Tupac was shot and robbed at Quad Studios in New York City. He survived the attack, but the incident fueled deep suspicion and anger within the rap community. Tupac later accused several people connected to the East Coast music scene of having prior knowledge of the attack. That accusation helped ignite the infamous East Coast-West Coast rivalry. Journalist Chuck Phillips later investigated the Quad Studios incident and reported claims from sources who believed the attack was originally intended as a robbery and intimidation, not a fatal encounter. According to those accounts, things escalated when Tupac attempted to defend himself and chaos erupted. However, the full truth behind that night has never been definitively proven in court.
As far as, is he going to turn people in? Is he going to cooperate? If the federal government wants him to cooperate and they're going to cut his time, because right now he's looking at 15 to life. With all the charges he won't get out until 70 years old. He about 70. That's when they start talking about letting them come to a halfway house.
What made the story even more controversial were allegations that some figures in the music industry may have had prior awareness that the attack could happen. Those claims have never resulted in criminal charges, but they became part of the mythology surrounding the feud. The tragedy that followed only deepened those questions. In March 1997, just 6 months after Tupac's death, Christopher Wallace, better known as the Notorious Big, was killed in a drive-by shooting in Los Angeles. Like Tupac's murder, Biggie's killing remains officially unsolved. Over the years, various insiders have offered their own theories about the circumstances surrounding that night. Kirk Burroughs, a co-founder of Bad Boy Records, later claimed in a documentary that Biggie had concerns about traveling to Los Angeles at the time. According to Burroughs, there were warnings about tensions on the West Coast following Tupac's death. Still, Biggie traveled to Los Angeles for promotional appearances tied to his upcoming album. After leaving a music industry event in the early morning hours of March 9, 1997, he was shot in a drive-by attack while riding in a vehicle through the city. Witnesses described the suspected shooter as a man wearing a blue suit who disappeared into the night. Despite years of investigation, no one has ever been formally charged with Biggie's murder. The lack of resolution in both cases has allowed speculation to grow for decades.
Boy, Puffy called me though. Puffy called me back in the day. He called me, he was like, I just want you to know I ain't have nothing to do with your brothers. You know, I know who you are, but we never met. And I just want to call you man to man, let you know that I ain't have nothing to do with your brothers. Now, why was he calling me, reaching out to me?
Now, with the Tupac case finally moving through the courts, some observers believe the trial could reopen discussions about the entire era, including unresolved questions surrounding both killings. Former LAPD detective Greg Kading has previously said that cooperation from key figures in the music industry could have helped investigators years ago. However, many people connected to that time have consistently denied any involvement in the violence that shaped the rivalry. What makes the current defense strategy so explosive is that it risks pulling those decades-old controversies back into public view. Instead of focusing only on the events of one night in Las Vegas, the courtroom could end up revisiting an entire chapter of hip-hop history. And depending on how the arguments unfold, the trial might reshape how that history is remembered. For nearly 30 years, the stories surrounding Tupac and Biggie have lived somewhere between documented facts and unresolved questions. Now, as the case moves closer to trial, the world may finally see whether any of those questions will receive answers, or whether the mystery will continue for another generation. One theory that has circulated for years suggests investigators may have struggled with how deeply the Tupac and Biggie cases were connected.
If that's part of the indictment, that's someone like a blackmail. He was blackmailing people to be in the freak-offs. So that's federal. That could be that's a federal charge. He can't blackmail people to say, yo, listen here, you did it once and you're gonna do it again. That ain't gonna make it with the government or nobody.
According to this idea, pushing too hard in one investigation might have complicated the other. The two tragedies mirror each other in haunting ways. Two global icons, two drive-by shootings, and two cases that remained unsolved for decades. Both events shaped an entire era of hip-hop history. For years, speculation placed powerful industry figures at the center of those rumors. One name that repeatedly surfaced in discussions was Sean Diddy Combs. It's important to note that he has never been charged or named as a suspect in either murder. Still, the whispers surrounding that time period never fully disappeared. Court filings connected to the Tupac investigation reportedly referenced Combs dozens of times in witness statements and discussions surrounding the broader context of the case. Those mentions alone do not prove wrongdoing, but they show how frequently his name appeared when investigators were piecing together the events surrounding the rivalry. Then, another controversy added fuel to the conversation. In 2025, a civil lawsuit filed by a man named Stephen Otis accused Combs of assault during an alleged incident in a Manhattan hotel years earlier. The lawsuit also included a claim that Combs made a threatening statement referencing Tupac Shakur's death. According to the filing, the alleged comment suggested that if someone could arrange harm against a powerful figure like Tupac, others should be careful about challenging him. It's important to stress that civil lawsuits contain allegations that must be proven in court. The claims in that case have not been confirmed through criminal conviction.
I don't think they are scared of him. I think they more so, they don't want him to embarrass their reputation and things that they've been known for. You understand?
Still, the quote caught public attention because of how directly it referenced one of the most famous unsolved crimes in music history. Observers said the alleged statement sounded less like a casual threat and more like someone invoking the mythology surrounding that era. Whether true or not, it added another layer of controversy around the ongoing discussion. Meanwhile, critics argue that Combs has consistently denied any connection to violence tied to the East Coast-West Coast rivalry. In interviews over the years, he has often dismissed those rumors as baseless speculation. During a 2016 appearance on The Breakfast Club, he responded to questions about the accusations by saying he refuses to entertain what he described as nonsense. In another interview years later, he spoke about Biggie's death with visible emotion. He said he still felt a sense of responsibility for his friend, but framed that feeling as regret over missed decisions, including travel plans that might have kept Biggie away from Los Angeles at the time. Supporters see those statements as proof he had no involvement in the violence. Critics say the explanations shift slightly depending on the interview. Either way, the narrative surrounding those years remains complicated. Then in March 2024, federal agents carried out high-profile raids on properties connected to Combs in Miami and Los Angeles. Investigators collected various items and documents as part of a broader federal investigation into allegations about activities linked to private gatherings hosted by the music executive. While the most serious accusations in that case were not proven in court, Combs was convicted on separate federal counts connected to transportation for illegal purposes under the Mann Act. Those legal outcomes dramatically changed how the public viewed the once untouchable mogul. Authorities also began examining financial assets connected to his businesses. Properties worth tens of millions of dollars, including homes in Los Angeles and Miami, became part of ongoing legal scrutiny tied to forfeiture proceedings. For prosecutors, those actions were about dismantling networks they believed enabled exploitation. For supporters of Combs, the investigations represented an aggressive government response to controversial allegations. Regardless of perspective, the power balance around him had clearly shifted. Now, the upcoming trial of Dwayne Keefe D. Davis threatens to reopen many of the unresolved questions from the 1990s. What began as a case about one tragic night in Las Vegas could evolve into something much larger, a courtroom examination of the entire East Coast-West Coast conflict. If Davis's defense team pushes forward with its strategy, the trial could bring decades of rumors, rivalries, and unanswered questions back into public discussion. For Sean Combs, the situation creates a difficult dilemma. If he were called to testify and firmly denied the accusations, the defense might attempt to use that denial to challenge Davis's credibility. But if he refused to testify, critics could interpret that silence in different ways. There may be no simple outcome. The defense team understands that dynamic. Prosecutors understand it as well. Somewhere in a Las Vegas jail cell, Dwayne Davis is watching events unfold as the case moves slowly toward trial. With the proceedings expected in 2026, and possibly later depending on legal delays, the world may be waiting years for the courtroom drama to fully play out. By the time the trial begins, it may represent more than a criminal case. For many observers, it could become a moment where decades of speculation finally collide with sworn testimony. The central question remains the same. Is Dwayne Davis inventing stories to save himself, or is he repeating something the music industry has quietly debated for years? Until the evidence is fully tested in court, the truth behind one of hip-hop's most painful chapters remains unresolved. But one thing is certain, the next phase of this legal battle could bring long-buried questions back into the spotlight.